I'm a 33-year-old family medicine doctor running my own clinic in Portland. But a decade ago, I was a 17-year-old whose future was derailed when my parents siphoned off my $85,000 college fund to fuel my stepbrother's Broadway aspirations. 10 years later, when he was penniless and my parents came pleading on his behalf, I closed the door on them. Here's how it unfolded. My mother, Marianne, married my stepfather, Roland, when I was 13. He brought along his 16-year-old son, Adrian, who quickly became the star of our household. Adrian was obsessed with becoming a Broadway sensation, spending hours belting out show tunes and perfecting his dramatic gestures in front of the mirror. I'll give him credit, he had a decent voice, but his work ethic was non-existent and his ego rivaled that of a megastar. Roland was the kind of divorced dad who tried too hard to be the fun parent. He constantly raved about Adrian's artistic talents, proclaiming he was destined for Broadway stardom. Every conversation somehow circled back to Adrian's latest audition or performance. Meanwhile, I was acing AP Chemistry and Biology, volunteering at the local hospital, and meticulously planning my path to medical school. The favoritism was so blatant it was almost comical. When I got into the National Honor Society, Roland's response was a dismissive, "That's great, sweetheart. Did you hear Adrian landed the lead in the school play?" When I scored in the 95th percentile on my PSATs, Marianne offered a polite nod before pivoting to Adrian's need for new headshots. Adrian soaked up the attention like a sponge. He'd burst into song during family dinners. Mid-conversation about something mundane like the grocery list, he'd launch into Seasons of Love from Rent as if we were his captive audience. Roland would glow with pride while I sat there, wondering if this was what a migraine felt like. The disparity in how our achievements were treated was stark. My science fair projects earned a half-hearted, "Good job, dear." Adrian's community theater gigs. The whole family showed up, armed with bouquets and followed by a celebratory dinner. I once took first place at the Regional Science Olympiad, and Roland's only remark was that we could head home early since Adrian had rehearsal. One moment from my junior year perfectly summed up the family dynamic. I'd spent months researching antibiotic resistance in local water systems, logging weekends at a university lab, collecting samples, and presenting findings that impressed my AP biology teacher enough to nominate me for a state-level competition. That same week, Adrian got a callback for the lead in the community theater's production of Anything Goes. I won second place at the state competition, a huge achievement for college applications. Adrian's callback, not even the role, dominated family discussions for weeks. Roland even framed the callback notice and stuck it on the fridge. My state science medal, tossed in a drawer somewhere. I figured college would be my way out. I'd been saving every cent from my part-time job at a pharmacy, working 3 after-school shifts and long weekend hours. The work was grueling, restocking shelves, manning the cash register, and explaining to customers why their pets' meds weren't covered by insurance. But every paycheck went straight to my college savings. More importantly, Marianne had always promised that my college fund would cover the rest. This wasn't some vague assurance. It was a real account set up by my biological father, Martin Reinhardt, who died in a car crash when I was 8. Martin, a practical engineer, had created an education fund that grew steadily through smart investments. By my senior year, it was worth nearly $85,000. Not enough for an Ivy League medical school, but plenty to cover undergrad debt-free and set me up for med school applications. My plan was clear. 4 years of pre-med at Oregon State, a strong GPA, a solid MCAT score, acceptance to Oregon Health and Science University, residency, and eventually becoming Dr. Clara Reinhardt. That's where I went wrong, assuming the money my late father left for my education was untouchable. The bombshell hit in the spring of my senior year during college decision season. I was researching med schools, comparing pre-med programs, and preparing to accept my spot at Oregon State, which offered the best mix of academic prestige and in-state tuition. Marianne came to my room with that sugary tone she used when delivering bad news. The same one she used when she said we couldn't afford my senior class trip to DC or a car for my 16th birthday. "Sweetie, we need to discuss college," she said. I thought she wanted to talk about dorms or class schedules. I was dead wrong. "Your stepfather and I have decided to use your college fund for Adrian's career development," she said. My brain couldn't process it. "What do you mean, use?" I asked. "Adrian got into an intensive summer program at Juilliard, and there's a year-long acting conservatory in New York, she explained. This is his big break, Clara. His chance to make it in the industry. The words felt like a punch to the gut. I felt sick. That's my college fund, I said. Martin left that for my education. Marianne's face hardened, her defensive look when she knew she was being unfair but wouldn't back down. Roland is your father now, and we make decisions as a family. Adrian's dreams are just as important as yours. Adrian's dreams? I was aiming to become a doctor to save lives. He wanted to prance around on stage singing show tunes. Don't be so dramatic, Marianne said. You can go to college later. Adrian's window is now. He needs to seize this moment. Seize the moment. For a 20-year-old who'd never held a job, never paid for anything, and whose biggest achievement was playing a background cowboy in the school's Oklahoma. You can take out loans like everyone else. Roland chimed in from the doorway, where he'd been eavesdropping. It builds character. Adrian's artistic growth can't wait. Character building, sure. Because working multiple jobs to afford med school while Adrian chased his art in New York was exactly what Martin intended when he set up that fund. I argued every angle I could think of. The money was from my father, not Roland. My career path had clear earning potential, while Adrian was chasing a long shot in an industry where most actors are unemployed. Med school was expensive and competitive. I needed that financial foundation to succeed. None of it mattered. Roland had convinced Marianne that Adrian was the family's golden ticket. One hit Broadway show and he'll be set, Roland kept saying. Doctors are a dime a dozen. A dime a dozen, from a man who ran a Jiffy Lube and thought oil changes every 3,000 miles were the height of expertise. The argument dragged on for 2 hours. Roland kept talking about return on investment and nurturing artistic talent. Marianne insisted this was what families do, support each other, and called me selfish for not seeing Adrian's needs. I pointed out that this was essentially theft, taking money meant for one person's education and handing it to someone else. Then Roland dropped the real bombshell. The decision's already made. We've talked to the financial advisor and started the transfer process. Adrian's program begins in June, so we had to move fast. They hadn't consulted me, hadn't asked my opinion, and had already started moving my money to fund Adrian's fantasy before even telling me. The worst part? Adrian's reaction. He didn't even have the grace to feel remorse. He was already browsing New York apartments and talking about how he'd thank the family in his Tony Award speech. Don't worry, Clara, he said with a smug grin that made me want to scream. When I make it big, I'll help pay for your med school. Think of this as an investment in both our futures. An investment in his Broadway dreams, using my late father's money. I locked myself in my room for the rest of the day, oscillating between rage and despair. Everything I'd worked for, every plan, every sacrifice, depended on that college fund. Without it, med school felt nearly impossible. That summer was brutal. While Adrian posted Instagram stories from fancy Manhattan coffee shops and industry mixers, I picked up extra shifts at the pharmacy and applied for every scholarship, grant, and loan I could find. The financial aid office at Oregon State became my second home. My counselor, Mrs. Schneider, knew my situation and was quietly furious on my behalf, though she stayed professional. There are options, she said, spreading out scholarship forms, loan applications, and work-study details on her desk. Merit scholarships, need-based aid, work-study programs, loans. It's doable, but it won't be easy. What she didn't say, but we both knew, was that it was far harder than it should have been. Students with family support could focus on grades and activities. Students like me had to work 30 hours a week just to eat. I cobbled together a financial aid package that covered about 60% of my costs. Merit scholarships paid part of tuition, need-based aid helped with housing, but there was still a gap. I filled it by working nights at a 24-hour diner near campus, the Sunrise Cafe, serving coffee and pie to drunk college kids and graveyard shift workers from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3 nights a week. My freshman year schedule was brutal. Classes all day, studying in the afternoon, work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 hours of sleep repeat. I survived on vending machine coffee and whatever free food I could scrounge at the diner. Stale muffins, nearly expired soup, or the occasional sandwich from a kind cook. Meanwhile, Adrian's Instagram was full of artsy posts about his journey in New York, funded by the $85,000 that should have paid for my education. My grades took a hit that first year. I managed a 3.4 GPA, not terrible, but below the 3.8 I'd aimed for. It's hard to excel when you're sleep-deprived and your main meal is a granola bar between classes. But I adjusted. I found study groups that met during my waking hours, built relationships with professors during office hours while others partied, and learned that med school admissions valued candidates who'd worked their way through college. It showed grit and discipline that trust fund kids couldn't match. Adrian's updates from New York grew vaguer and less frequent. The Juilliard summer program went well, but the year-long conservatory was tougher than he'd expected. His posts shifted from artistic breakthroughs to complaints about the cutthroat New York theater scene, the high cost of living, and the struggle to stand out among countless talented performers. During family calls, Roland made excuses. He's honing his craft. New York's tough to crack. He just needs more time. What Adrian needed was a job, but that seemed beneath him. When I spoke to him directly, he griped about auditions that didn't pan out, expensive classes that didn't deliver, and the general grind of making it as an artist. By my sophomore year, I'd found my groove. Smarter time management led to better grades.